Welcome to episode 9 of the Employee to Boss podcast. I'm your host, Hayleigh Hayhurst, and today I'm talking with Nicole Chua, the founder of Knick-Knack Socials. Nicole's a social media manager from the Philippines that specializes in Instagram and Facebook group management. She helps women entrepreneurs and coaches with content creation, strategy, hashtag research, organic engagement growth, and lead generation. This is a really amazing conversation about how Nicole started her social media agency, the steps she took to get there, and also the questions she had to ask herself along the way. Because it's not something that she just jumped into, which becoming an entrepreneur, there's two ways you can do it. You can just totally quit your job and be like, I have to make this work. Or you can put a strategy behind it to make sure it works. Nicole was working 3 9-to-5 jobs right after college before she started her own social media agency. She'd planned to go get her MBA, but due to the pandemic, she just decided that it was time to look at her finances, figure out if entrepreneurship was for her, and then she started working for a different social media agency and ultimately decided to start her own business, Knick-Knack Socials. We talk about how your income may fluctuate as an entrepreneur, things that you need to work out. It's a very transparent episode, but we also talk about amazing social media skills like how to find your ideal audience, what to post, where to post, how to get people to find your business. So this episode is really for anyone who wants to upgrade their social media game or become a social media manager, which is a booming business right now. So I am so excited for you to listen to this episode. Let's get right into it. Today I have Nicole Chua on the show, and I am very excited to have a social media manager on this podcast. Social media is just so confusing for so many people, and it really just is like a second job to their already busy job. So hopefully this conversation offers you a lot of value.
Yes. Thank you so much, Hayleigh, for having me in this podcast episode. And I really resonate with the title itself, From Employee to Boss, because my background was I had 3 9-to-5 jobs after uni. So imagine that, right? I was a treasury assistant. I was also a research analyst and a public relations assistant. So after that, I got a scholarship from one of the universities in Taiwan. I was supposed to take my MBA there, but then pandemic happened. So that got delayed. And then I canceled it because I tried online work or as a general virtual assistant last year. And then I worked for several social media agencies as a social media manager. And that's where I fell in love with this area of the online space. I also want to give a shout out to Clubhouse. I know that you're also on Clubhouse, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so early this year, Clubhouse was really like the social media platform, right? Because of the audio, and you can't really edit your voice because it's in real time. So it's more genuine, right? And I got my 2 first direct clients from Clubhouse just this year, January, and I'm still working with them until now. And that's where I realized that I can be an independent social media manager. Like, I can do this, I can create my own social media agency. And that's where my realization started to, create my own social media agency from scratch. So I started out as a solopreneur, doing everything, wearing all of the hats. And then just this September, I resigned to my job as a social media manager for this big social media agency. And I also hired my first social media associate. So September for me was really a special month. But yeah, don't get me wrong, especially for your listeners who are planning to quit their 9-to-5. It was a calculated risk, meaning I checked my savings. I also have an emergency fund. So an emergency fund for me was good for 6 to 1 year. So it's my monthly expenses times 6 or times 12. So that's where I realized that I really can do this now, to risk it and to start my own agency and be my own boss. Because as much as I appreciate being a social media manager for other agencies and also being a general virtual assistant for other companies before, it's still a 9 to 5, right?
Mhm.
Because it's not your company, it's really not your clients, but their clients. So I just want to have this more freedom with my time and also with my strategies. Because if you're a social media manager for other agencies, you're not really the lead strategist. So yeah, so that's where Knickknack Socials came into place, like just this September. But I've been catering to their clients ever since this year, 2021.
That's awesome. I love the fact that you had so much saved because on this podcast, of course, I'm encouraging people to follow their dreams, quit their 9 to 5, follow whatever passion they have. But you have to do it responsibly, right? Unless you have just all the money in the world and it's risk free, go for it. But a lot of people keep their 9 to 5s and never follow their dreams because of that consistent paycheck. And so I think that you're a great example of someone who can go from the 9 to 5, start working the job that they actually want, a social media manager, and then branch off and do it by yourself. And so I think that's such an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you so much too, Hayleigh.
Yeah. So you talked about your background and you talked about how you got into the social media manager role. So I also started my business off as a virtual assistant. So like a year and a half ago, I was a virtual assistant. And then I started doing podcast editing. I realized virtual assistants was not what I love to do, but podcast editing was. And so I grew that side of my business and kind of left the VA side behind. Social media manager is such a fun position as well because you're creating content for other people. But it is pretty time consuming getting to know your clients because you have to get to know them on a personal level. You have to know their voice, especially if you're writing captions, things like that. And so, what are some practical tips that you can share about getting started as a social media manager?
Yes, so some of my practical tips for people who want to branch out as a social media manager from being a general virtual assistant is that you need to get as many experiences possible. So like what I did, I worked first with big social media agencies and practiced what I have learned from online courses that I have bought, and also, the free resources from Google, from YouTube. But it's really different when you apply that in a real business or in a real social media platform. So yeah, so that's just my tip, is before you go into being an independent social media manager, you can gain some experience from working under an agency first. And that's okay, because every master is once a beginner, right? So that saying is really true. And yeah, you can gain a lot of network as well when you go out. So for example, you're from Upwork, or if you're also a Filipina listening to this episode, you will be familiar with Online Jobs PH, Outsourcely. You can also go out from those platforms and create your own account. So on Instagram, on LinkedIn, some VAs that I know have Twitter. So, you can get really creative. And this is our advantage in this technological generation that we have. Like, we can get clients from anywhere. And I got my first clients from Clubhouse. So, yeah, you just have to be creative, because a lot of people, because I am in many Facebook groups, that's where I met you. And I kept on seeing people like, okay, the market in Upwork or in Online Jobs PH are very saturated. then you need to be more resourceful if that's the case, right? But yeah, so those are just my tips that I hope helps.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are really helpful because there's no shame in starting your business under someone else, right? Every single job you've ever had, you've probably had a boss. And it's the same thing. Like, if you want to go into social media management, an easy way to learn from other people without investing in courses or coaches would be to join an agency. But you started off as that, and then you grew into your own agency, which I think is a dream for a lot of people. They have this dream of making money working with clients, but then being able to outsource to other people the things that maybe they don't want to do, or maybe the things that they don't have time to do. For instance, I have an assistant who helps me with a lot of like the back end stuff for some of my clients. She's not working directly with them, but she's helping me help them. It's kind of like, it's very helpful for me. And so when you decided to start your agency, if anyone listening is at this point, what were some of the first things that you did, along with how did you go and find your first person to hire?
I've been eyeing this person for a while now, since July, because she is one of my previous workmates before. And she's really great. She's a graphic designer, and I really love her work ethics as well. So yeah, that's why there's trust already. And yeah, just a disclaimer though for the listeners here. Knickknack Socials is not yet a big social media agency, since I just started this officially September of this year. But yeah, I am planning to grow my team. And my reason for this agency, aside from myself reasoning, is that I want to provide work from home opportunities to my fellow Filipino and Filipina people. Because when the pandemic started last year, many people lost their jobs, and our unemployment rate this year is still high. So I want to help out in that area, economic wise, and also, for people that really needs the job. And it's more safer when you work from home, right? Because the virus is still there, even if the restrictions are easing up, right? So yeah.
That's awesome. That's like your motivation behind the whole thing, which I talk about this on probably every episode so far, is you have to find your why and then stick to it. So I'm happy for you that you found like your why and your purpose. And it seems like your agency, you're not thinking in like a selfish way of, oh, I want to make money and have other people help me. It seems like you really want to help the whole community that's going to help you and, bring them up with you. So that's a great mindset to have. I would love to talk about like building your online presence, especially on Instagram. So when I was looking for guests for my podcast, Instagram was a huge place that I wanted to make sure my guests had already, figured out their branding, figured out their messaging, and like know what they're talking about. And of course, you can look like you know what you're talking about on Instagram and have no idea, but that's a whole nother story, right? So
Yeah.
how do you grow your online presence and make it like, one, look like very aesthetic and look like you, and then also share your messaging at the same time?
Yes. So you're lucky. I'm a social media manager that specializes in Instagram and Facebook group management. So, social media, when you hear the word social media, it's not just Instagram or Facebook, right? Because there are other social media managers that also specialize in other platforms like Pinterest, Twitter, LinkedIn. So, yeah. So, first off, before diving deeper into Instagram, make sure that your target audience are most active on Instagram. Because if not, then you're just wasting time on this platform. Because we have different target audiences, client avatar or buyer persona, right? So make sure that this platform is really where they hang out the most. So my advice when it comes to Instagram is first make sure that you have done your market research, because everything that you will post is all about your ideal clients, your target audience, not really about you. I don't know if you're familiar with this book, Story Brand by Donald Miller.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, so I got that idea from that book. So basically, when you are in a certain platform, make sure to talk less about you. Like many people would say, okay, you should talk about more about you so that you can build trust. But in the first stages, especially if you're new on Instagram, you need to build your authority. You need to make sure that you're one of the people that um they can go to when it comes to, for example, social media management, podcast management, right? That's why market research is so important, because this is your basis, your foundation in everything. And then when it comes to branding, it really goes down to the colors that you want, right? Like for example, for you, so espresso, so more of coffee tones, right? For
Yep.
me, yeah, I love it. For me, it's more of like fun colors, pastel, pink, purple, right? So for the branding, it can really be up to you for from your personality. So yeah, but basically the main point would be make sure that the content that you're putting out there is not something that your target audience would or can read from your competitors, because what's the point, right? Why would they follow you back or follow you if your content can be seen or can be read from your competitors, right? So that's why, even if it's really time consuming also to conduct a market research like an interview style, it's really important, because that was also the foundation of my content before. But just because I worked with a big social media agency, I had an idea already. But if you are still a newbie and you don't work with anyone else yet, make sure to do your market research. And then for the aesthetic part, yes, it's important to have like a uniform style. Some people would try out the grid, or the, for example, pink, white, or for example, in the middle, all of it are quotes, and then from the left and right, it's their pictures.
Hmm.
You know, it's okay. I don't have anything against that. But the thing is, most people, especially the high ticket clients, they really read your content. They don't really care about the aesthetic of your feed, but they really care about the caption or the value per content that you're putting out there. So
I
yeah.
think that's a big one. The market research part is so important. So I work with podcasters, and depending on what type of podcast they have and what industry or niche they're in, I definitely recommend certain platforms for them. I think Instagram that's my favorite platform, so I'm a little biased towards it. But if it's something like a news podcast or a political podcast or something very timely, I always recommend Twitter to them. That's going to be the best place to get that timely episodes out there. Instagram is more for like lifestyle and fun and, still business, of course, but you can also do business on Facebook. You can also do business on LinkedIn. Knowing where your audience is so important, because you can be preaching all of your information on LinkedIn, but you have a lifestyle podcast and no one is going to look at family photos on LinkedIn, right? So it's really just making sure you're spending your time effectively.
Yes. And that's also one of the common mistakes that I observed, especially when I was working with these big social media agencies, that clients want to have every social media platform. Like they want a Facebook page, an Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, even TikTok. Like, I'm not against all of those platforms, but it's just that you're wasting time, and especially posting the same thing on every platform. Like, I don't get it. How can you convince people to like follow? For example, they're already following you on Instagram, and then you're convincing them to follow you on Pinterest, when the thing is you're posting the same thing on your Instagram, on your Pinterest, on your Facebook page. Like, why would I follow you on other platforms if there's no difference, right? So that's also one thing that I observe that entrepreneurs make, right? Because I understand, because they're pressed with time, so they want to cast a wider net, right? To catch more fishes, but in reality, when you cast a wider net, the fishes won't come to you. They
Yeah.
will just be scared of that big net.
Yeah. It's kind of like how people say when you try and help everyone, you help no one. So I don't have Twitter. I don't have TikTok for business. I really just use Instagram and sometimes Facebook for my Facebook group. Yeah. So I think that's super important to know, especially when you're starting off. Don't try and reach everyone. It's not worth your time. It's not worth your money, because time is money. It's just going to just overwhelm you.
Yeah. And also, what I observe with other entrepreneurs, coaches, is that they want to save money. That's why they don't want to hire a social media manager yet. So that's why they're doing that. They're in every platform, they're trying out every content possible to post, like inspirational, educational, because those are the main content pillars, right? Educational, inspirational. But if everyone is doing, or if everyone has educational and inspirational in their content pillars, what what is your difference from those people or from the crowd, right? So instead of saving more money, yes, you're saving more money because you're not hiring anyone, but the income stream that comes to you is, restricted as well, because you don't know how to navigate the platforms that you want to be in, or the platforms that your target audience is mostly active.
Yeah.
So that's just my 2 cents as well.
I love that. How can we stand out? If a lot of people have this paralysis around starting because they're like, so many other people talk about what I'm going to talk about. There's no scarcity of clients, there's no scarcity of information. People will follow you because they like you specifically, but that's hard to realize when you're first starting, right? And
Yeah.
so, what are some easy things we can do to stand out from the crowd?
I think because in the part for me, how I do it with my clients during onboarding is I ask them, what's your USP, your unique selling proposition? And that's what always makes them think. Like, that's the last question to be answered every onboarding. But it really starts within you. Like, for example, other people are naturally cussing. Like, it's natural for them to cuss, but it's not really like a disrespectful way. That's
Mhm.
just how they speak. And some people love it, some people don't. But it's okay, because you can, with cussing naturally, because that's you can filter out people that isn't really your dream clients, because all of us have dream clients, right?
Yeah.
And if, for what you have mentioned earlier, if you attract everyone, you attract no one. So just be yourself, right? And it's so hard to pretend to be someone else, because you can burn out with doing that, because you can't really express yourself. Like, I want to post this kind of topic because this is me, but then again, I'm pretending to be this kind of person that I think is more likable. So being conformative, or being like in line with everyone else, like for example, if you're a coach and you're copying everyone that is your competitor, like your audience wouldn't identify you as someone who's unique.
Mhm.
Like, for example, Hayleigh, you, right? Your branding is espresso. So when they think of coffee, they might think of you, right? Because they know that you really love coffee. But if you didn't put your brand that way, right? Like if you copied other podcast managers with no branding, like how can they remember this Hayleigh, right?
Yeah.
So this also applies with entrepreneurs, especially women coaches, because most of my clients are women coaches. So yeah, so the USP is really important, and it starts with you. It really is up to you as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I literally just posted a reel today and I was saying how you can have a podcast with one type of messaging. Let's use this podcast as an example. I like it to be very conversational, very relaxed. Of course, I want it to be professional, but I don't want it to be like structured and like I'm reading a question and you're reading the answer, right? And so I was challenging people to listen to their own podcast and feel that vibe, see what they want their audience to feel, and then go look at their social media and does it match? Is it the same vibe? Is it fun? Is it conversational? Do people feel like they can reach out to you? Because the last thing I want is your podcast to look fun, relaxed, like you, and then your Instagram to look very business-like, right? It has to connect. And so I was challenging people to do self audits on if it connects, and if it doesn't, like find the disconnect. But maybe you can go more into that. Like I'm sure you've seen this all the time with different types of businesses. It doesn't even have to be podcast related, but there's a disconnect between social media platforms sometimes and what you're posting and what you're saying and what you're acting like. Can you give any advice on like how to make it very cohesive?
Yes. So actually, at first, you won't really get that perfect balance
Mm-hmm.
because, as I've mentioned earlier, especially if you're starting out, you're still finding your own voice because that also took me many months. And Clubhouse helped with my voice a lot. Thank you, Clubhouse. Because I've also observed in my community, in my Instagram community, that the posts are really business like more of LinkedIn content rather than Instagram content. And when they show up on their stories, it's not like them. So I think finding that perfect balance is to not be scared because people tend to be scared. Like they want to be in the safe side. Like, okay, I'm gonna set the tone of my content like the blogs that I'm reading. So it's more business like. So that's just what I would post on my feed, right? So I think the source of not being like in line with your content or with your podcast, with your IG stories, is that the fear of going outside the box again. So, yeah, but when you start to go out of your comfort zone, when you start to embody your most authentic self, that's where you can stand out. That's where you will identify your USP. So yeah.
That's awesome. This has been one of my favorite conversations I've had on this podcast. It's so educational and so actionable. Everything that I want this podcast to be, answering the questions for those who just want one source to find the answers, right? It's hard to go all over the internet and Google, and you get so many different opinions. So you work with clients all over the world. You're in the Philippines, but you have clients in Europe, the US, different places. And there's obviously different time zones, which I here in Seattle have had tons of issues scheduling, even within America with a 3-hour difference. Oh my gosh, it can be crazy. And so, how do you keep communication with your clients effective and then also in order?
Yes. So my clients either have Slack or WhatsApp. So we communicate there. And this is the reason why, I mean, I don't know if I'm just lucky, but I'm a morning person. So I get up at around 6 or 7. So at that time, most of them are still awake because it's evening, like your time, right? We met
Mhm.
5 p.m. your time. So they're still awake. But yeah, I don't know if I don't also want to to promote myself, but I mean after the service, like they don't have any complaints. And if they have additional instructions, they will just send me anytime and I will just read it and apply it the next day. So with the communication issue, there's really no blockages with me and my clients, even if most of my clients are in the US, UK, Europe. They know how I operate. And this is why it's important to hire an expert and not, I mean, I'm not against general virtual assistants because we both started as general virtual
Yeah.
assistants, right? Like, woo, go VAs. But it's really different when you hire an expert, like an expert podcast manager, an expert social media manager, because you don't need to instruct them. You don't need to hold their hand every time, every now and then, right? Like, hey Nicole, you need to do this, you need to edit this, you need to check the hashtags if they're still, relevant, because we already know that.
Right.
So this is the convenience that I'm giving to my clients. I'm an expert already, and that's why I have a very detailed onboarding with a very detailed questionnaire as well, because I don't want to go back and forth with them as well, because one of the reasons why they hired me is that they want to save time. So that's why they hired an expert, a social media manager. So I think that is also the reason why I don't have any communication issues. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's such a good point. When you're hiring, you can go for someone who's cheaper or like has a lower hourly rate or even is on an hourly rate. Like I moved away from hourly rates and that's because I know what I'm doing, right? And it's not like to make myself sound better than anyone else, of course. It's just I know the time it takes, I know what it takes. Same with you. You know all the details of social media management. And so the person who hires you doesn't have to train you. And that's a huge thing for busy entrepreneurs. And so that's a great point. That's such a good point.
Yeah, and we already have a process, right? Because I also walked away from charging per hour. I just have monthly packages. And I think it also helps that you have a system. Because me, I have a system with my clients. I do content 1 week or 2 weeks in advance before scheduling it. So it's still like, even if they're not doing most of the work, they're still involved in the process because they're the ones who need to approve it, who has the final say. So I
Yeah.
think that's also the same with you, right? When you're editing podcast episodes, like you have a system, you have a schedule, you have deadlines, right?
Yeah.
To to give the convenience of to our clients.
Yeah. And a lot of my clients and I work together over long periods of time. And so it really gets to this trust where I can just schedule it and they don't even have to check it. Like they know it's good.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it's like, of course, I always like to check everything and I'm like a perfectionist in so many ways. So I'm like, everything has to be
Me
so
too.
good.
I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Yes, yes, recovering perfectionist, exactly. And so it's really just, I mean, communication with clients is just so crucial. And I love all those tips that you shared. So, what is your favorite social media scheduler?
Right now, because it's free, Creator Studio.
Okay, nice.
How
I
about
will
you?
tag that one in the show notes. I love Later. I use it
Oh,
for myself and some of my clients. It's super simple. It's free. It's so
yeah.
easy.
Yeah, I've heard of Later. I'm gonna check it out because of you.
Yeah, it's really easy. I like that one a lot. Well, this conversation has been so fun. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
Yeah, so if you're someone who's listening until this period, thank you. And if you're planning to move away from your 9 to 5, good job for realizing that, but make sure to do calculated, risks, and make sure to be prepared, because being an entrepreneur, I know you know this, Hayleigh, our monthly income isn't stable.
Mhm.
Like, it's not like in a 9 to 5 job. Like, if they say your salary is $1,000 per month, then you're gonna expect that every month. But if you're an entrepreneur, it can be 1,000, it can be 2,000, it can sometimes be 500, you know? So you have to be prepared with that, because I also was shocked when I first started out, branching out, being an independent, because it is fluctuating.
Yeah,
And what's important is you need to adopt with those changes. So, yeah.
completely. This is just totally transparent. I remember one month not that long ago where my income dropped by almost $1,000 in one month. And it was just like, it wasn't anything I did. It was just my client contracts were expiring.
Mhm.
One client was like, I am going to have a midlife crisis. I need a minute. And I was like, okay. And so it was very revealing to how interesting, that's the word I'm going to use, interesting entrepreneurship can be. And of course, I recovered, found more clients. It's not like the end of the world. There's always other
Yeah.
people out there. It went
Mhm.
back up the next month, but it's just one of those things that you do have to prepare for.
Yes, it is a roller coaster ride. And that's why it's important to have like savings, the emergency fund that I've mentioned earlier, just to be realistic, right? But this is why I really love working with coaches.
Mhm,
Because when you work with coaches, it's like you're also helping their clients by helping them, right?
definitely.
Because coaches, they don't stop after their program. Their clients still, they still reply to their clients, their students, because I would know, because I'm logged in on their Instagram.
That's awesome. Thank you. So, how can people find you? How can people work with you? What are some services that you offer?
Yes, so you can find me on Instagram. It's very long, at social media manager underscore Nicole. And what I offer is that mostly I help women entrepreneurs and coaches with their content creation and strategy, hashtag research. My most bestseller, organic engagement growth plus lead generation, and also the reels editing, even just reels idea, I provide that, and also Facebook group management. So if you're someone who's needing assistance with those areas, I also offer a la carte. That's why the organic engagement growth and lead generation is one of my best sellers. So most of my clients right now just bought that package. So if you're interested in that, you can DM me on my Instagram account. And yeah.
What does lead generation with you look like?
Yeah, so basically I have a questionnaire. So I pass that questionnaire because most of my clients are coaches, right? So they have their own unique voice. So I want to mimic that voice. So it's much like, it's fun because it's like you're acting. Sometimes I'm acting to be like them because it should sound like them, not me.
Mhm.
So I think that's my USP. I make sure to mimic my client's voice. So I have this very special questionnaire. After they answer that, I will base it. And then basically, I will go out there and search for their target audience, who their target audience are based on the questionnaire. And then I genuinely interact with those target audiences. And then if the package includes organic engagement growth, answering the DMs, the comments, making sure to engage with their current community, because your potential client can also be the people that is already following you. And most people don't realize that. They always do the outreach when in fact you can nurture your current audience, especially if you have a number of following already. And this is also, I also discussed this in my most latest post, is one of the mistakes that coaches make is that if it's 1 week or 2 weeks before their launch date, that's just the time that they're active on social media. And then after that, they become a ghost. So that's one of the reasons why people, don't interact with you, because you don't interact with them. So what you give is what you take on Instagram. And if you've observed in this like platform, right? Like in any platform actually. So yeah, success or the community doesn't have it happen over time. You have to work for it at least, right? To establish yourself, to for people to know you, to trust you. So if someone says that you can be, trustworthy overnight, 1 week, 1 month, that's not true. So it really takes time, and you need to have the patience and consistency to do that.
That's amazing. So if anyone is interested in that lead gen, which is so crucial to business, definitely DM Nicole. All of the information will be in the show notes. And I love to end every single episode with you sharing 3 actionable tips that the audience can start with today.
Okay, so the 3 actionable steps that our listeners can take, especially if they're planning to leave the 9 to 5, is first, again, check your emergency fund, your savings fund, if it's good to go, if it can support you for the next 6 months, 1 year. So if that's okay, then check. The second step would be you need to research what the entrepreneurial life is, because most of the people that are posting on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, they just post the good stuff. So that's why most people have this perception that being an entrepreneur is just fun, you control your time. But as you've mentioned earlier, your story, right? That's also one of the things that you can experience. And are you up for that? And it's okay if you don't. It's not bad to stay in a 9 to 5. I don't know if that's a different perspective, right? Because everyone keeps saying, no, leave your 9 to 5, be an entrepreneur. But being an entrepreneur takes a lot of guts, a lot of resilience, and you need to be ready with that. So if you did your research, then the second step is check. Third, take action now. Don't wait for that perfect time. There's no such thing as perfect time, because I was also that person before. Don't get me wrong, I'm not this perfect entrepreneur. I also got delayed. That's why I stayed with the social media agency for more than a year before branching out and starting my own agency, because I kept on saying, this is not yet the perfect time. This is not yet the perfect time. Even if I check my savings, my emergency fund, I still told myself it's not yet the time, when in fact I was just scared. So self-awareness can also help with that. We can be scared, but if you're always scared, if you're always, excessively calculating every step, then when will you start, right? So just start, and then everything will come into place. And during your experience, that's where the greatest lessons appear. Not from the books, not from the coaches, not from the YouTube channels, the online courses, but from the experience itself. So those are just my 3 actionable tips for people who wants to leave their 9 to 5 and pursue entrepreneurship.
Awesome. I love this. I love this conversation. It's probably one of the most real conversations I've had on this podcast so far, because you're right. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone. You can start off, if you're nervous, you can start off, of course, with like a side hustle or something. You can have it as a side income. It doesn't have to be all in. quitting your job. You don't have to one day wake up and be like, I'm done with my consistent income. I'm just going to figure it out. If you want to do that, go for it. But like 100%, it could be a side hustle, and there's no shame in starting off as a side hustle. See how it goes. Things like that. So thank you so much, Nicole, for joining me. This has been so fun.
Thank you so much for having me. This is the first time that I have guests in a podcast episode. So thank you so much, Hayleigh.
Oh my gosh. Well, I could not tell. You were awesome. You were amazing. Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.